I'm James. I'm an alcoholic. I recorded the original of this tape in Durham, New Hampshire, November 17th through 19th, 1989, in accordance with the 11th tradition and the 12th step of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Annual Seacoast Big Book Seminar at Durham, New Hampshire. First of all, I'd like to thank Charlie. I know they've had a busy week, then in North Carolina and other parts. I am Larry, and I am an alcoholic. Hello, Larry. Something in my mind, an idea about alcoholics. I always thought that most of us were left-handed. Would everybody that's left-handed please raise their hand? Okay, everybody right-handed, please raise their hand. Okay, I'm wrong. Okay, to Judith.
Hi, my name's Judith, and I am an alcoholic.
Hi, Judith.
Welcome. You're in for a hell of a weekend, let me tell you. And could we please have a moment of silence followed by the Serenity Prayer? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change,
the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
And I'd like to introduce two wonderful men who I met 2 years ago, and I started reading the Big Book constantly since then. And I'd like to introduce to you Charlie and Joe.
Which one is the house mic?
This is the house mic right here.
Hi, everybody. My name is Charlie Farmington. I'm a very grateful recovering alcoholic.
Hi, Charlie.
Because I'm a member of the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and by the grace of the power that I found in the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous, I haven't found necessary to take a drink for 7,324 days today, one day at a time, and for this I'm very grateful. Sure nice to be here in New Hampshire getting ready to talk about the Big Book Alcoholics Anonymous, the thing that we love the most. I was sitting here looking out across the room a while ago and looking at this beautiful room we're in, and I don't think we really realize how fortunate we really are, for all of us to be here tonight and be sober, all of us to know where we were last night, know where our cars are today, know who we slept with last night, if anybody, remember whether it was good or not, some of the side benefits that come from being sober through this fellowship. As Joe and I, as we start one of these, we always like to begin by saying we certainly do not consider ourselves to be the gurus of the Big Book Alcoholics Anonymous. We're just two old drunks that met together some years ago, found we have a mutual interest in the big book, studied it together for a while, and what few things we have learned, we love to be able to share them with other people. Certainly we do not consider ourselves to be experts on anything. We do not speak for AA as a whole, and you are most certainly free to agree or disagree with anything we say as you see fit. In fact, if we say things that can't be reconciled with the Big Book, we'd suggest you don't pay any attention to those things at all. We also like to say that we really believe we're meant to be joyous, happy, and free. That's what our book tells us. We love to laugh, we love to joke, we love to cut up. We love to hear other people laugh also. And we realize that some of these sessions become quite long. We also realize that the mind's only going to absorb what the rear end's going to be able to stand. And if you feel the need to get up and move around a little bit during one of these sessions, please feel free to do that. It won't bother us at all. Or if you feel the need to get up and go out and get a cup of coffee, don't wait for a break period. Go right ahead and get a cup of coffee. That's fine. That won't bother us at all. Or if you feel the need to get up and go get rid of a cup of coffee, for God's sake, don't sit there and suffer in silence. Just go ahead and do it and come on back, and everything will be going just like it was before. The main thing is, let's have a good time this weekend. Let's not only look at our book and study about our book and talk about it, but let's enjoy ourselves and have a good, enjoyable learning weekend about the Big Book Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you for allowing us to be here. We're always completely overawed when we have the opportunity to come to an area where we haven't been before, and we certainly appreciate it. Joe?
My name is Joe, and I'm a real alcoholic. Through God's grace, because this program works one day at a time in my life, I haven't found it necessary to take a drink since the 10th of March, 1962, and for this I'm grateful. It is truly good to be here. I was sitting up here, as we do a lot of times when we get ready to start a Big Book group, looking over the crowd, and Charlie and I always say the same thing. This is the best looking group of 6 people I've seen in a few days. But it is good to be here. It's been a memorable few days for us. We was able to get up yesterday and go to Bill's home in East Dorset, Vermont, and spend the night there last night. And it was a special thing for us to be here, and to looking forward also to this weekend in the Big Book study. Charlie and I usually talk a little bit to give you some background maybe of where we're coming from. As Charlie said, we're just 2 alcoholics who, the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous, that our lives came together. And many years ago, it seemed like about 1971, I began to work with alcoholics myself, which I still do today. And I felt a great need yearning at that time to do this. And I had my sobriety. I figured, well, I was all right in my life, but as I began to work with people, I knew as I sponsored people during that time, I worked with a lot of alcoholics. But then when I got into working in the field, all at once I had about 20 or 25 alcoholics. And I began to realize that how am I going to get a program over to these people? It's all right with 1 or 2 one-on-one, but I was running into difficulty. So I began to say, well, maybe I better learn more about the program. So I began to study the Big Book. I began to talk to a lot of people in my neighborhood about the Big Book in my AA community, and I found very few of them that were very interested in the Big Book. In fact, I become somewhat of a nuisance around my group. People would see me coming and run the other way because they know they were going to talk about the Big Book. And I began to wonder, maybe I'm wrong, because a lot of these people had a lot of more sobriety than I did. And they said, well, we don't need to know how it works, we just need to know it worked. But I continued my study anyway, and I was about to give up on it. And in 1973, in the spring of 1973, after 2 years of this, I was asked to introduce the speaker of all places at an Al-Anon convention. And it was Charlie. I hadn't met Charlie. People don't realize, but Charlie lives 225 miles from me. We don't live in the same area. And I always talk about how I introduced him that night. I told him I was very disappointed in the speaker. I saw where his name was Charlie P., and I thought it was going to be Charlie Pratt, And this guy wasn't even the right color when he showed up. But he and his wife, he talked that night, and we know how everybody at one of those conferences, it was 300 or 400 people up there, come and talk to the speaker, and I kind of got out of the way and let them talk. And then after it was over, Charlie and I got back behind the stage, and we got to talking. And after I talked to him about 5 minutes and knew him a little bit, I began to tell him about my favorite subject, the Big Book. So that was my favorite thing of that day and still yet today. And to my surprise, this guy was interested. In fact, he was the first person I ever met in AA that was interested in the Big Book, and I wasn't bound to let him go. So we talked that night, and I think we became instant friends that night. We have one hell of a relationship that we've been together this many years, and over the Big Book, and I guess the Big Book in our lives, and we have a tremendous relationship, by the way, too. We've never had an argument in 15 years. Never had the least discussion. And I think it's not from our lives, but from what the Big Book puts into our lives. And it began a merry-go-round in my life that had never been the same. Charlie and I studied the Big Book, and it wasn't any intentions. It was just our interest, personal interest. And through this personal interest, we would meet and study. We would meet together at different conferences, where my wife and his wife would go to Al-Anon conferences and AA conferences. We'd be together. And every Saturday evening, I hate to admit it, doing the Al-Anon program, we would slip off in the room and study the big book. And a third guy heard about it after about a year, and we met with him last weekend, Tony. And Charlie asked, could he come in? And I thought it was somebody else outsider coming in. I didn't feel too good about letting somebody else getting involved in it. But he came in, and then after that, another person found out about it. And maybe another year, 18 months, we would try to start it, and we'd go to a conference, and somebody said, are y'all going to have a big book study or whatever? Are y'all going to study the big book? And it would be 18 or 20 people sitting in a bedroom on the floor, on the carpet, listening as we went through the big book. After 4 years of this, in 1977, there was a guy in the room, one of those rooms I believe in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And he said, this is good. He said, I'd like for my group to hear this. Would y'all come and put it on for my group? Well, we couldn't imagine a group of people wanting to hear this. But we told them we would come. And we went out there, and it was in Lawton, Oklahoma. There was about 35 people there. And we did the first big book study. There was a taper, a story of a taper that taped it, and he taped it on a big reel. And he told me, he said, that was pretty good. I believe I'll take that reel and make it off on 4 little cassettes. It was a four tape study then. And he said, I'll see if people would like to have some of them. And he called those tapes the Big Book Study tapes. That's where it got its name. So those tapes went around, and Charlie and I began to invite to go to different places to do this, maybe through the Midwest and through Arkansas and Texas and up into Iowa, up in that part of the country, where we mostly traveled. Probably did 8 or 10 studies a year in 78, 79. And it was on one of those trips that we met somebody that became another special thing in our lives, a guy from Florida called Wesley Parrish. And Wesley was a great student of the book. He had probably been studying the book way before Charlie and I come into AA. Wesley had never been able to totally unlock the book, and I think possibly Charlie and I's approach and ideas of the book came from two minds. Wesley would never have been able to see it in the scope that we had seen it. He was amazed I remember the day we met him, and Charlie and I were doing a big book study, and Wesley he was a guest speaker up in Des Moines. I think it was Des Moines, Omaha, Nebraska. He was going to talk that night, and he was listening to the big book study. And he came down to the table after a while, the first break, and he looked at Charlie and I, and he said, who in the hell are you guys, and where did you come from? He was just amazed at the big book study. We became instant friends, and he took a great interest in the big book study. In 1980, he was at the International Convention. Wesley actually put on a luncheon. Actually, he paid for it himself and set it up on a Wednesday before the conference. And he invited 1,500 people to this luncheon. And he asked us, could he give away some of the big book tapes at door prizes. We told him we didn't care. We have no claim to them whatsoever, but he did ask us. And you have to understand, Wes, he was cunning and baffling and powerful. He was a real alcoholic. And these 1,500 people, he seated the people. He had selected where they were going to seat. He was over the whole thing. So these people thought they won these tapes, but they didn't win them. Wes had already picked them out to win them. And these tapes went to people that were from every state in the Union, all over the world. And as these tapes left New Orleans and went back, the big book study went back all over the world. And, and of course, as a result of that, Charlie and I's lives have not been the same since then. And we've been invited to go to, we've been in most of the major cities in most states in the United States, about 3 or 4, doing these big book studies since 1980. And we've had the opportunity to be in Australia twice, a couple of times, in New Zealand and Canada, all over Canada. And England, I was in England this spring, and next year we're going to be able to go to Germany and Sweden and back to England. So I think, Charlie and I feel it's not anything big, it's just, like I say, we're two plain alcoholics that met through the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous and the miracle of the circumstances that still occur as a result of God's work in the lives of people. And we think I feel that we've had a small opportunity, a great movement is taking place, and it's real. AA is healthier. Charlie and I probably see more of AA than anybody alive. And it's really a great thrill to see Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole, all over the world, going back to what created it, the big book Alcoholics Anonymous. That Alcoholics Anonymous all over the world is going back to its original program. It's getting interested in where we came. It's getting interested in the big book Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, it was the big book Alcoholics Anonymous, as we talk about this great miracle, created by 40 and then 100 people. And this book itself created the fellowship. And somewhere along the line, you know, the fellowship got so big it kind of got away from its book. But I think it's a great urge in the fellowship today to go back to our original beginning, to what really brought us here, the big book Alcoholics Anonymous.
As we talk about the book this weekend, we'll have one up here on the table that I'd like to invite any of you to look at that might wish to. This is an original, first printing, first edition of the big book Alcoholics Anonymous, printed in 1939. Approximately 5,000 of them printed. If you'll notice, the outside measurements on this book are quite large in relation to the book today. But if you would open it up and look on the inside, you'll see that the actual typewritten page itself is the same, but the margins are quite wide. In doing so, they made it a much larger book than it would normally have been. These people were also cunning, baffling, and powerful. They knew the bigger the book is, surely the better it's going to sell. They printed it on about the thickest old paper they could find, the cheapest paper. That makes it real thick and makes it a fairly large book, and that is where the name The Big Book came from. That dust jacket on it is the original. It's a facsimile of the original. Most of the original dust jackets are gone by now. They call this the circus jacket. Can't you just see some old drunk on New York City walking down the street, holding this under his arm and trying to remain anonymous at the same time?
Come the color.
The book itself, if you take the dust jacket off, the book originally was a very bright red with gold lettering on the front of it. So they certainly were not at least trying to hide the book when they made the dust jacket and printed the color of the book the way it was. If you'd like to see this, it'll be up here on the table. Please be careful with it. It's getting old. The paper's getting brittle. It does tear quite easily. It would do me no good to have it at home, though, where other people couldn't share it. If we couldn't share it with other people, we might as well not have it. But I just ask you to please be careful with it.